Good morning, everyone. You see I am modeling the church hand fan. There are more in the back. The ushers can bring them to you if you so desire. Thank you for joining us here today, and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. I'm Reverend Dina McFeeters, honored to serve as Associate Minister here. At First Church, we welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all that you're carrying with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We'd like to pay a special welcome to guests joining us today. If you're a guest visiting us today, we invite you to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you. Drop it in the offering plate later in the service or at the guest table in the social hour after the service, and we will be able to then reach out to you and get to know you better. Everyone is invited to a social hour immediately following the service across the hall in the Lean House Common Room. We welcome people who are watching online. Hello, everyone out there. We're glad you could join us too. And we are streaming this service live. Folks can find hearing assist devices and large print hymnals and large print orders of service at the back where you came in. And there are also worship activity bags for children and those young at heart. There's a fragrance-free section in the front right pews. And if you're watching online, YouTube has closed captioning, so you can enable that on the device you are using. If you have any trouble with that, please let us know. Finally, I'd welcome us all to our worship service by inviting us to say our unison affirmation of our congregation's mission, which is printed in your order of service. Are you ready? We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words are from Marta I. Valentin. We pause this morning from the chaos of the world to reclaim the beauty within these walls that carry us through our week. We lift this community onto our shoulders with grace-filled expectations for each other, for our children, and for our children's children. Our opening hymn is number 1010 in the Teal hymnal, and we're going to sing it about 3 times through. I'd invite you to rise in body or spirit, and children and religious education volunteers are invited to go to your programs during the second verse as we sing you on your way. Let's settle ourselves and our bodies as we enter into a time of spoken meditation, followed by shared silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life, which is number 123 in the gray hymnal. So you might want to adjust your position for comfort, maybe soften your gaze. Perhaps bring your attention to your breathing, whatever works for you to become centered in this moment, in this space, in this gathered people. The spoken meditation is by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Good morning. My name is Busy Schultz, and I'm honored to serve as your worship associate this morning. I met Robin halfway through freshman year of college. Our connection was immediate. The soulmate kind of friendship where it felt like our spirits recognized each other. The first part of my freshman year was marked by loneliness. I was in a new part of the country without connections or community. I tried to fill my loneliness by filling my schedule. Twice a day rowing practices, an overload of credits, a part-time job. I poured myself into these activities, searching for purpose and connection, and failing time and again to find it. Robin and I were in the same dorm complex, but had never spoken beyond smiling to one another in passing, on the long walk to campus or in the dining hall. She always seemed so light, so effervescent. When we finally met, our connection was immediate and was deeply meaningful. Over the 23 years since, we both experienced massive life transitions. Births, deaths, marriage, divorce, heartache, celebrations, career changes. She is the friend I can call in the middle of the night when I need a good cry or a good laugh, or when I need someone to hold the mirror up and ground me. Geography has separated us, but our deep connection has remained strong, except for this one chunk of time. When I moved back to Milwaukee after college, I floundered. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get myself together. I was lost. And I was struggling with mental health issues I had worked really hard to ignore. It was confusing. It was a difficult time for me, casting about, trying to make sense of myself. Internally, I was overwhelmed, confused, unsure. Everything was hard. At the time, I could not share what I was experiencing, especially with those who loved me best. Partially because I was embarrassed. But I also withdrew because I thought I needed to face my mental health challenges on my own. Perhaps not the best choice to go it alone. But with the help of therapy, I learned strategies to help manage my thinking patterns. My withdrawal from family, friends, from Robin, this kindred spirit, was unannounced. I didn't make it known that I just needed time. Instead, I gradually stopped returning calls, emails, I stopped reaching out. I stopped connecting to these touchstones in my life. Robin and others continued to reach out to me without knowing what I was going through. I can see now that this was grace calling to me. Eventually, over time and with help, I regained my balance and started to feel like myself again. I was able to get to a point where I was ready to reconnect to those I had disconnected from, if they would accept me back. Could my unannounced withdrawal be redeemed? It had been over a year. I remember how my hands shook as I dialed Robin's number, my body filled with the sensations of nervous apprehension. Would she even pick up? And then there she was. Her voice, so kind, so familiar. At the sound of it, as familiar as my own, I could feel the tension leaving my body and the doubt in my mind ease. As I started to talk, she paused me and said, "I love you no matter what." Those simple words flooded me with relief, and I felt her forgiveness. a forgiveness that allowed me to share all that I had not been able to share. Robin gave me grace by waiting for me. When I was ready, Robin was ready too, ready to listen unconditionally and provide me love, support, and acceptance. By giving me grace, she also gave me the opportunity to practice giving myself grace. Robin and I were together last weekend. I told her that I was planning to share this story with all of you. We both cried. She looked at me through our tears and said, "You were so far away and so lost, and I couldn't help." But she did help. She helped by giving me the time I needed and then welcoming me back with open arms. It would have been easy for Robin to simply let our friendship go, but she didn't. Against all logic, she gave me the gift of a grace period much longer than any libraries. And that grace, at the risk of sounding corny, was truly amazing.
About 7 years ago, before self-checkout kiosks were a thing, I was waiting in line at the public library to check out some books. The woman ahead of me seemed a little stressed. The librarian was kindly explaining to this young mother that she had a fine to pay. The mom's 3 or 4-year-old child must have sensed the tension in the air because he piped up and said, "He's the library guy. He loves you." While the payment of the fine was sorted, the child went into a mantra saying, "He does love you. He does love you. He does love you. He does love you. He does love you," over and over again. Made my day. I love libraries. And the grace period that libraries extend to their borrowers is one of the best parts, and perhaps worthy of theological reflection. We are all living on borrowed time, are we not? Our lives are a gift. Some would say a gift of grace. What is grace? The dictionary says grace means elegance or beauty of form, favor or goodwill, mercy, clemency, pardon, a short prayer before or after a meal. In his book, Heretic's Faith, yes, you heard that right, Heretic's Faith, a vocabulary for religious liberals, Fred Muir defines grace in 3 ways. Perhaps one of them will ring true for you. He says grace is an experience of unity with all that is. Grace is a blessing, a sense of being blessed. Grace is life itself, and we receive grace when we learn how to listen for it. If grace is so good, then why do we resist receiving it? Especially after we make mistakes. Do we think we don't deserve grace? The traditional Christian definition of grace has a lot of stuff attached to it. We can't talk about just one theological word like grace because other big words come along with it, stuck together like sticky burrs on the bottom of your pant leg when you come out of the woods. Grace is stuck together with God, is stuck together with salvation, is stuck together with sin, is stuck together with forgiveness and free will, and so on. The traditional Christian definition claims that grace is bestowed upon humans by God. People can only receive grace through supernatural assistance. Grace is described as an undeserved, infrequent, an unpredictable event. And yet we need grace in order to be saved from eternal damnation. The reason that grace is considered undeserved in this theology is because of original sin. Adam and Eve blew it way back when, and we're still paying for it now. So because humanity fell from grace, it's not a sure thing that we'll ever find it again. How will we get back to the garden? Among the sticky burrs of theological words is an argument between St. Augustine and Pelagius from the late 4th century and early 5th century of the Common Era. As I describe the argument, see if you can detect which side of the argument our Unitarian and Universalist beliefs come from. According to Augustine, after the fall from grace, humans are to be considered totally evil and deserving of damnation. He thought human beings sin at every turn. He thought we needed grace from God in order to do anything good. But according to Pelagius, humans are free to choose the good. We are able to take the first steps on the road to salvation by our own efforts. Original sin, in his view, is not passed down to Adam and Eve's descendants. According to Pelagius, grace is given by God so that humans can more effectively choose the good. The debate about the relationship between grace and free will continued through the centuries and found new voices in the Protestant Reformation of the 1500s and early 1600s. Augustine's theology echoed in the voice of John Calvin as he formulated his doctrine of predestination, in which there is no free will after the fall of Adam and Eve. God decides that some people will be saved and some will be damned. Humans are totally dependent on grace to be saved from those hellfires. In contrast, a man named Jacobus Arminius from Holland voiced his belief that Jesus died for all humans, not just the elect. He maintained the line of thought from Pelagius, that divine sovereignty is compatible with free will in humans. Even if we did not spend our formative years in a religious tradition that taught complicated or impossible access to grace, we may have absorbed a punitive mindset from society. The idea that we don't deserve a grace period runs deep. Why is that? Do we like punishing ourselves? Is shame a better place to live than loving acceptance? Do we think we need to pay a fine before we can live in a state of grace? Even when the grace period at the library expires, like it did for the young mom I witnessed, we exist, I believe, in a larger sphere of grace. The young child chanted about love while his mother paid her library fine. A budding theologian, if I ever heard one. He asserted with his mantra that everything that was happening in that moment was surrounded by love. He does love you. He's the library guy. The New York Times reported on July 9th that an overdue book was returned to a Massachusetts public library after nearly 120 years. She gave me the article. James Clerk Maxwell's An Elementary Treatise on Electricity. It would take a long time to get through that. 208 pages of formulas, etc. Was published in 1881, purchased by the library in 1882. The last checkout date stamped in the book is 1904 or 1905. It's a little hard to see that last number. However, the book is in optimal shape, the librarian said. It doesn't look like it was thumbed through a lot. The words are legible, the spine is sturdy. When an elementary treatise on electricity was last checked out, the New Bedford Free Public Library charged a 1-cent fee for every day it was late. Had that late fee rate remained without a cap, the borrower would have owed roughly $430. Without a cap, at today's late fee rate of 5 cents per day, the balance would be more than $2,100. But late fees were capped decades ago at $2 total, to encourage people to return their books, the librarian said. So we hear in the library example that grace is both individual and societal. An individual with overdue books has the fee capped to help them as an individual, but also to encourage the restoration of the book to the community. Forgiveness of debt works on the same principle, yet sparks much more controversy. Consider the recent uproar about the initiative for the forgiveness of student loan debt. Young people with massive student loan debt, just as an example, in 1978, 1 year of my full-time tuition cost $4,000, an entire year. Young people don't have that now. Okay, I digress. So you can tell I believe that young people with massive student loan debt could use a hand up as individuals trying to make a life. And yet loan forgiveness could also benefit society if those same young people were freed to use their paychecks to invest in the economy, in the local community. But the uproar around this issue, why should their debt be forgiven and not mine? I worked hard for everything I earned, so can they. Forgiveness, mercy, grace seem to go against society's values. Yet, as religious or spiritual people, we say we believe in it. Consider cities that offer a gun buyback program, or turn in your guns, no questions asked. That grace benefits the individual and the community. Why would we as communities not do this more often? Do we not believe in grace? Muir claims the modern understanding of grace is that it is unexpected, unearned, and everywhere. He wrote, in Unitarian Universalism, grace is the affirmation that worth and dignity are inherent to who we are as human beings, regardless of the mistakes we make, or the tensions we create, or the separations we need. Regardless of what society might tell us, we know that we are valued. Some of you may know the history of the hymn Amazing Grace. The author of the words, John Newton, was an Englishman who was a slave trader. He bought and sold human beings, a sin of the highest order. At some point, he had a moment of conversion from this evil trade, an experience of grace, after which he became an opponent of slavery and an ardent supporter of abolition. He wrote the words of Amazing Grace to describe his conversion and express profound gratitude for the grace that caused him to see the error of his way. I chose not to have us sing Amazing Grace today because Unitarian Universalists often balk. You know what I'm going to say, don't you? We often balk at saying the word wretch. Right? Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch. Like me. We're like, can't say that word. Our high theology of human nature, which I love, and our deep belief in our own goodness prevent us from considering ourselves to be wretched. I understand that. I used to balk at the word myself. Kathleen Norris wrote in her book, Amazing Grace, A Vocabulary of Faith. The word wretch has taken two paths to arrive at current English usage. The Oxford English Dictionary says that in Old English, it had a somewhat romantic connotation. A wretch was a wanderer, an adventurer, a knight errant. In Old Teutonic, however, a wretch meant an exile, a banished person. And it is there that the word's negative connotations began to haunt us. The word as used today means not so much one who has been driven out of their native land, but one who would be miserable anywhere. To some extent, we have internalized the word to mean someone who is exiled from being at peace within the self. She continues, maybe there are people who are so thoroughly at home in themselves that they can't imagine anything other than being comfortable, let alone displaced or wretched in spirit. But I wonder, I suspect that anyone who has not experienced wretchedness, exile, wandering, loss, misery, whether inwardly or in outward circumstance, has a superficial grasp of what it means to be human. People want grace, it seems, and will admit to being lost and blind in John Newton's fine old hymn. But don't ask them to admit that it might take knowing oneself as a wretch to truly know grace for the wonder that it is. It seems to me, she concludes, that if you can't ever admit to being a wretch, you haven't been paying attention. I know, that's a bold statement I just quoted from Norris. It's not that I want you, my dear ones, to feel wretched. Far from it. But some of you have told me of going through miserable, wretched times, and how someone saved you from despair. Someone saved you from destruction, and that person was your grace. Some of you have told me about suffering the wretchedness of addiction and hitting bottom, and that the only reason you could rise from that dark place, the only explanation for why you are alive today, is grace. The theologian Paul Tillich wrote, grace strikes us when we are in great pain and restlessness. It strikes us when we walk through the dark valley of a meaningless and empty life. It strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we have violated another life, a life which we loved or from which we were estranged. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it is as though a voice were saying, "You are accepted. You are accepted." I get a lump in my throat just reading that quote. I want to believe in that voice of acceptance. But because I'm me, or because I'm a minister, or because I'm a UU, I gotta wonder, where does that voice come from? How can I hear it more often? Where does that voice come from? Well, that's another theological discussion. Ultimately, I think it doesn't really matter where it comes from. It matters that we hear it and allow ourselves to receive it. Busy's friend said, "I love you no matter what." The child said, "He's the library guy. He loves you." If we listen for grace, we might hear it. We can figure out what it means later, after we take it into our hearts. Grace is sometimes defined as an undeserved favor, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, whether they deserve it or not. What if we lived as if everyone deserved grace? Even those we don't want to forgive, even ourselves. I believe that grace is what softens our hearts and allows us to forgive harm, or at least to consider beginning the long work of forgiveness. And beginning that work also creates space for grace to enter. In my experience, when I give someone the benefit of the doubt, it frees me. It frees me from irritable Dina, of which there is one. It frees me from spending my energy on judging the other person. It opens the possibility for loving curiosity. What is really going on? How can I give that person grace? When I receive the benefit of the doubt from someone, that also frees me. It frees me from my inner critic, the sense of being undeserving, the downward spiral of self-incrimination. It opens the possibility that I could give myself some grace. Once, when I was in a dark place of grief and isolation, a friend offered me a small, round, clip-on red metal pin that said, "You are loved." I hesitated. I was suspicious. I thought it was some kind of street corner proselytizing. She said, "No, really, it just means that you are loved." I took the pin. In our Soul Matters packet about grace, the Reverend Scott Taylor asks, "Do you believe in grace?" Every religion has its way of declaring that grace is always there, somewhere, that that no tragedy, defeat, or evil is so large that it eliminates grace entirely. That's a big claim. That's a big claim, friends. And I'm tearing because I'm looking at those of you who have suffered big defeats, tragedies, and evils. But we have to know, and I have to say that universalism, our Unitarian Universalism, has a huge love at the center and all surrounding all of us. So I'll leave you with the question: do we need a grace period? Or do we need grace, period? The answer is both. The challenge is to open ourselves to the possibility. So may we be open. May we know we are loved. May we know we are accepted. May it be so.
Every week, we have the opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all non-pledge cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. The Wisconsin Unitarian Universalist State Action Network is our Share the Plate recipient for the summer. WUSON brings together the collective energy and power of Wisconsin UU congregations and fellowships to build a statewide advocacy network working to uphold the worth and dignity of every person while acting to further justice, equity, and compassion. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Thank you, Alyssa. The closing words are by Denise Levertov. As swimmers dare to lie face to the sky, and water bears them, as hawks rest upon air, and air sustains them, so would I learn to attain free fall and float into Creator Spirit's deep embrace, knowing no effort earns that all-surrounding grace. Will you please rise in body or spirit for our recessional hymn, number 18 in the gray hymnal, What Wondrous Love.